Hi, everybody, and welcome to Observing with Webb for March of 2016. Just wanted to let you know that March, there's not much going on, but I'm going to talk about some of the things that I've been telling my high school astronomy students to study. I'm also going to talk about the planets that we can see. Then I'm going to move on to the moon. And then I'm going to move on to some constellations, and then again some things that I'm showing my astronomy kids, or asking them to observe with their little telescopes. But again, not much going on other than Jupiter, Mars, and Saturn being visible, but Jupiter throughout the night, Mars and Saturn in the morning. We've got the spring temperatures starting, allowing us to stay out a little bit longer without our toes freezing, probably. The moon stops by the three planets I talked about, and the vernal equinox starts our astronomical spring. So we've got some stuff, but nothing crazy, really. So let's first talk about the planets that you can see. As you can see on the screen, I've got it set for March 14th. And what I'm going to do is just move it to right about sunset, and then let's go forward about half an hour. What you see over here is Jupiter off in the east, okay? Not too high. But if you look toward the east, you'll also see Leo marching as well with Jupiter. And as time goes by, Jupiter's going to rise and get higher and higher along with Leo. Let me zoom out. Okay. And what'll happen is it'll move across the sky, and it'll be in the south by around midnight, and then it's going to keep moving until all the way to the west, until right around sunset. Sunrise. Jupiter sets in the west, along with Leo for the entire night. So Jupiter's really fun to look at through a telescope. It's one of the things I'm asking my students to look at, because you can see the cloud bands and you can see the moons, Callisto, Ganymede, Io, and Europa's in there somewhere. Yeah. I need to fix my labels a little bit here, but that's what you can see through a telescope. So anyway, let's keep talking about those planets, but let's rewind the night. Because what's happening throughout the night is when Jupiter's at about its highest, which is a great time to observe it, around, well, I have it for daylight savings time here, about 1 a.m. After about 1 a.m. daylight savings time, Mars pops up out of the east-southeast. And what'll happen is it'll keep moving up and up, and then about an hour later, Saturn pops up as well. So I'm going to treat these two as being the same thing here. And what you notice, if you look closely, you'll see Mars is going to be a little reddish, and it's going to be right above this star called Grapheus. And Mars will be the redder one up here. Saturn is over here. It's more cream-colored. And you can use the bright star, excuse me, Antares, which is the bright star of Scorpius, to sort of make that right triangle in the sky. But really neat. Scorpius is pretty easy to find in the sky, I find. It's this nice S shape, and Mars and Saturn are right there. And they're going to rise up and move toward the south until sunrise. They will be directly in the south, and Jupiter will be setting. Now, some of you might be thinking, what about Venus? It's been beautiful for a while. And yeah, I agree. It has been beautiful for a while. You might be able to catch a glimpse of it before sunrise. Now, sunrise is 7:15 a.m. It's probably 5-10 degrees above the horizon. It's not going to be easy to find, but if you're good and you have a good horizon, you might be able to find it. Mercury, however, won't be able to see it. It's actually passing behind the sun from our perspective, so no way we're going to see it in the sun's glare. Anyway, let me move on to the events for the month, and let's use the moon as our guide. So let's go to March 1st, and let's go to the morning of March 1st. Excuse me, you've got the last quarter moon up in the sky. Let me go back a little more in the night. You've got the moon up there in the sky, and then you've got Mars, red Mars over here to the right, and Saturn down and to the left. You've got Antares down here as well, sort of a parallelogram shape there, although not quite, sort of off kilter. But that's going to be on the morning of March 1st. And Yeah. Then the next morning, let's say about 6 a.m., the next morning, the moon is going to be, I don't know why it's freaking out there a little bit, but the moon's going to be closer to Saturn over here, only about, let's see, 3 degrees away. And, yeah, slightly crescent moon in that case. Then what's going to happen is every night for the next couple of nights or mornings, is the moon's going to get lower and lower and thinner in the sky until the 9th, which is when we have a new moon, darkest skies, and in fact there is going to be a total eclipse, but that's going to happen around or in the across Indonesia and the Pacific Ocean. So if you live there, go see it, but I'm not going to concern myself with it because I don't live there right now, and this is not exactly a global phenomenon of a video. So let's take a look at the western skies then, and let's start looking at the western skies around sunset on March 13th. So actually, let's move back. So after the new moon on March 9th, you'll see that it gets higher and higher and thicker in the sky. March 13th is when daylight savings time begins at 2 a.m. And on the next night, the 14th, you've got a first quarter moon. Okay? First quarter moon, that means it's visible from, well, before sunset technically, but around sunset all the way to around midnight. And that's on the 14th. And you notice that there's not much around the moon at that point other than some cool constellations like Orion and Gemini. So what's going to happen is each night the moon's going to get thicker and thicker and thicker and brighter and thicker. And let's see. Oh, I lost my place. There we go. On the 20th of March, it actually has nothing to do with the moon, but 20th of March is the spring equinox this year. It's the first day of spring, astronomically speaking. It's when all of the Earth has 12 hours of day and 12 hours of night. Equinox, equal. And now, meteorologically, spring actually starts in the beginning of March, about 3 weeks earlier. But there's way more info on that on the Podbean site if you wanted to look at those links. Then the next night, oh, hey, you notice that the moon's getting kind of close to Jupiter? Yep. So on the next night, it's much closer. In fact, let me zoom in. The moon's pretty darn close to Jupiter, respectively. You can see the moons of Jupiter right there. And we're seeing that on the 21st, Jupiter and the moon are only about 2 degrees apart in the east, and they're going to travel to the south, okay, and they're going to be off in the west around sunrise. So let me just simulate that. Keep going forward, 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 forward in time, and the moon and Jupiter will set pretty much together in the west right around sunrise on the 22nd. So what's going to happen, let's take a look at 4 a.m. That's super early in the morning. But if you look at the full moon, what's going to happen is over the next couple of days, it's going to get a little less dim. Okay. Oh, sorry. Full moon is on the 23rd. Oh, sorry. I'm a little off today. Well, more so. But the moon is full on the 23rd, and there is actually a lunar eclipse. However, it's a penumbral lunar eclipse, which is when it actually goes into the outer portion of the shadow. Wonder if you can see this. This is the umbra. Okay, it's not going in there. It's going in the penumbra. Okay, in this lighter outer portion of the shadow. You don't really see anything. Okay, it's not even a partial eclipse. It's just going into that penumbra, and that's it. Anyway. So let's move on to the 28th because the moon's going to get thinner and thinner and thinner until still thin, still thick, still a waning gibbous. But what's going to happen is you're going to see Mars, Saturn, and the moon sort of come together. So the morning of the 28th, they're somewhat close together. You've got Saturn, Mars, and the moon. Then what's going to happen is the next morning, the moon is going to be up, but sort of in between Saturn and Mars. And then the next morning, they sort of make a line, Mars, Saturn, and the moon. The, let's see, that's 28th, 29th, and 30th. Then the 31st of March is when you have a last quarter moon. Over there in the southeast, that's only visible from, let's back up, about 2:30 a.m. And into the morning. You should be able to see it. So that's really it for what's going on for the month. I just want to show you a couple things that I'm asking my students to find. Let me go back to March 15th and let's go to sunset. We're looking toward the south. Let's go a little bit later. Now what I'm asking them to do, number one, is find Jupiter and look at it through the telescope and see if you can draw the 4 Galilean moons. I already showed you that. But over here is Orion. Orion's one of the popular constellations. It's easy to find. And what I'm asking them to do is to look at Orion and look at Orion's belt, but then move down to these 3 what look like stars, which is the sword of Orion, and zoom in on the Orion Nebula. Now, in a telescope, you might not see anything more than this little fuzzy. Depends on your telescope. But if you start zooming in and taking some time-lapse pictures, you can start seeing something like this, which is the Orion Nebula, which is a stellar nursery. It's where stars are being born. Gas and dust, vast big amounts, are being pulled together by gravity. That gas is compressing, heating up, and eventually getting hot enough to fuse hydrogen into helium, and that's where you get stars, and that light is bouncing off of the gas and dust that is still in the cloud there. Okay. Third thing I'm asking them to find is, hey, why don't you take a look at Orion, take a look at Orion's belt here, follow it to the right about 20 degrees, that's 2 fist widths at arm's length, and find the bright star Aldebaran in Taurus the V, but don't observe that, that's just a star, but it's cool, it's red. But move over another 10 degrees to this, the Pleiades, which I think I talked about last week. But with just your naked eye, you can see maybe 5, 6, maybe 7 stars. And, sorry, I talked about it last month. But then if you zoom in with binoculars, you can see tens, maybe hundreds of stars in there, and even more through a telescope, although with a telescope, you kind of zoom in on one star as opposed to the whole collection, unless you have a wide field eyepiece. The last thing that I'm asking them to look at with their telescopes is in between Orion and Jupiter. Not perfectly in between, but enough. You see this Cancer constellation. It's 1, 2, 3 stars that make a triangle, with another star in the middle of the triangle. Now, close to that middle is the Beehive cluster, M44, which is a really neat cluster of stars. And you can tell it's there because if you look elsewhere, you don't really see a lot of stars until, whoop, there's a cluster. And there's more information on it out there, but I think I'm going to stop there for today. Yeah, that's what's going on in the night sky. I hope you get a chance to, look at, let's go. Remember, Jupiter is going to be out there. It's going to move over to the west, and then early in the morning, Mars and Saturn are going to rise. And, yeah, I hope you have very clear, dark skies for the month of March.